Alrighty. We are live. If YouTube wants to work properly today, we should be live. Yesterday I went live and it just stuttered and didn't go anywhere. Let's see, is it going to do the same thing or are we actually live right now? And stuttered. We're live. Holy, it actually worked. Alright. We got some news to go through before we get to the House of Commons proceedings and then our favorite hour of the day. The political theater continues in the House of Commons during question period. I can't wait to listen to both sides repeat the same things over and over again and get absolutely nothing done. I am so excited. And hopefully everybody here joining me today will be just as excited as I am. Let's get it going. We have some interesting clips to go through, like I said before we get into it. Sound on, but not too loud. Hashtag liberal meltdown. Watching my neighbor tear down their Harris Walls sign. See, we got the volume on. Let's go.
Hope your day gets better.
Shut the fuck up!
Whoa. Positive energy.
Shut up! You don't understand English!
Hope your day gets better.
Oh my god.
Positive energy.
Shut up! You don't understand English!
Oh my god, the meltdowns have been real on Twitter. It is pure entertainment. It is just too funny. You see clip after clip and you wonder if they're authentic. You wonder if the people are legit or not, but some of them are they're just too funny. They're just too funny. This socialist is already lamenting that Trump won. He says Canadians woke up shocked, crushed, and afraid. Is that true? Are you absolutely crushed? I know I'm not.
I think a lot of folks woke up today and woke up really worried, really afraid, felt crushed. And I want you to know that now is the time for us to come together to defend Canadian interests. I know that the results of Trump, right now what it looks like Trump's election, is going to have serious impacts on Canadians. So we need to come together, all parties, all leaders, and put Canadian interests first. We have to protect Canadian jobs. We have to be prepared for the impacts of potential tariffs and what that would mean for our economy, for manufacturing, for jobs in Canada. We need to be very united.
Yeah, something that you have failed to do, Jagmeet, is be united and be for Canadians. Time and time again, you had the option to vote and have the vote of non-confidence go through, but you're sitting there waiting for your multi-million-dollar pension. When Canadians called you out being corrupt, you lashed out like a man-child. It just shows that every time this man opens his mouth, he is contradicting himself more and more. He is less and less for Canadians. And the little charade there, Jagmeet, is not working anymore. People don't buy it. People haven't been buying it for a while now. And it's time that I think the NDP takes a little step back or gets a new leader, gets somebody with half a brain on their shoulders at the very least. An interesting comment from Justin Trudeau. Trudeau says he's looking forward to working with Trump because the world has become more difficult and more complicated since he left office. I wonder who has made the world more difficult and more complicated. I wonder who is at fault for that. It's definitely not the guy we're looking at in the picture right now, right? No. Justin Trudeau is a perfect man. He's done nothing wrong for Canadians ever. Oh, he is a saint. He is a shining star.
First, I want to congratulate Donald on a decisive victory last night. I look forward to working with President Trump once again to strengthen North American economic opportunities for the middle class, to grow our economies in ways that make us competitive around the world, to protect North America from the many, many challenges that exist around the world. The world is actually even more difficult and more complicated than it was 4 years ago. And I know that there's lots of work for us to do, and I'm looking forward to do it. On our side, we've been preparing for this. We're looking forward to doing this work. and we're going to make sure that this extraordinary...
He is shitting his pants. That's what this essentially comes down to. He could sit there acting all calm and collective, but guess what? He and the entire Liberal Party are not prepared. They are not prepared for Trump to step into office and do everything he did 8 years ago, and he's going to continue it, and it's going to be even greater than it was then. They're shitting their pants, man. They are not ready in the slightest. They could sit here claiming this, that, and the fourth, saying they're prepared, saying they're ready for new deals with the United States and everything, but we have the weakest leader in the entire world right now, and I'm going to fast track this next clip just to prove my point. This is from 6 years ago, from a G7 summit. Trump in the middle, surrounded by other world leaders, while Trudeau is where he always is, on the outside looking in. There you go. There's Trudeau looking in as the G7 leaders have themselves a nice little conversation. Trudeau's not even involved. They don't even care about him. This is what international leaders and foreign leaders and the world, this is what they think of us, with Trudeau as our leader. Look at him slowly like leaning in there to try and involve himself in the conversation. Nobody cares about him. He's not even there to them. This was 6 years ago. The same thing is going to happen again. These G7 leaders are going to get together. They're going to all surround Trump. Trump's going to be the main talking head. And Trudeau, if we don't get his ass out of our government, it's going to be this all over again. Look at him. Look at him. I want every liberal who has ever voted for Trudeau to watch this video. This is what you voted for. This is what you voted for. Keep that in mind. Also, this is what you voted for as well. Chrystia Freeland says Canadians are feeling unsettled about Donald Trump's election, but she's confident her government will protect Canada's prosperity and sovereign identity.
Let me start by congratulating President and President-elect Trump and his team on a truly historic election victory. I and the Prime Minister and our colleagues are looking forward to working together with them. And I do want to say, because we live so close to the United States, I know a lot of...
Wow, I'm glad she knows geography. We live so close to the United States. We are going to work very hard with the United States. We have been friends with the United States. This is what she's going to say, right? She has no confidence. Chrystia Freeland, the crocodile lady producing the crocodile tears. I have no interest in honestly anything she has to say while she continues to back Trudeau and single-handedly destroy the country along with him. They are not prepared for Trump. They are not prepared. It's that simple. It is that simple. Speaking of something kind of funny, Hamas calls for immediate end to war after Trump election win. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Interesting. Interesting how that works. Interesting how that works. You guys wanted to go out of your way to cause all of this garbage in the Middle East, and then Big Orange Man Bad gets into office, and you put your tails between your legs and are getting ready to run away. Oh, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. We have a couple more things to get through before we get into House of Commons proceedings. We have a massive anti-Trump protest. This happened last night in Chicago, and another, I believe, smaller one happened in Philadelphia. Check this out. We have a bunch of people marching. Look, if you're going to have Palestine flags here, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been in power for the last 4 years and have done absolutely nothing. So if you're going to sit here protesting Trump, trying to back Kamala, then I clearly think you are not in the right headspace. But here we go. Massive protest outside of Trump Tower. And another one here in Philadelphia. Not as large, but still here. I believe this is the town hall in Philly or whatever it is. Interesting stuff going on there. Interesting stuff. We have just MSNBC being hypocrites at their finest. MSNBC sitting here before Trump was elected, blaming white guys, saying that it's going to be all the white people that are the issue that if Trump gets voted in. And the hypocrisy comes, if Kamala were to have gotten voted in as president, MSNBC would be sitting here praising all of these black men and Hispanic men. But because Trump got voted into office, MSNBC is calling black men and Hispanic men racist and sexist.
I just say,
When it doesn't go their way, the double standard gets pushed into the spotlight, and it's just so funny. Let's take a look at this clip.
really quickly, too. Democrats need to be mature, and they need to be honest. And they need to say, yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Right.
It's misogyny from black men. Things we've all been talking about, who do not want a woman leading them. Might be race issues with Hispanics. They don't want a black woman as president of the United States. You know, the Democratic Party, I've always found when you're sitting around talking, they love to just sort of balkanize everybody into these separate groups and say, oh, white people don't like women and black people. No, it is time for the Democrats to say, okay, and you and I have talked about this before, a lot of Hispanic voters have problems with black candidates.
Right.
A lot
and
of,
with other Hispanics. You got some that don't like each other. And some of the most misogynist things I've heard going on this Get Out the Vote tour came from black men. I mean, misogynist things. So you're absolutely...
Oh, so these things only matter when Donald Trump gets into office. I'm telling you right now, if Kamala were to have gotten into office, they would be sitting here praising how the minority voters came out in waves to support a minority into election. They would be sitting here spinning whatever story they want to believe. This just further proves how out of touch the mainstream media is and how much the mainstream media truly doesn't care about you. Because only when things play in their favor or don't play in their favor will they come out and truly say what they think. It's pathetic. It's disgusting. And I hope Donald Trump abolishes a lot of these mainstream media platforms that produce nothing but vile rhetoric that just further proves how out of touch they are, and they further discredit themselves as an actual news organization when they say stuff like this. Christ, somebody like me with 15,000 subs is more credible than MSNBC. There are way more YouTube channels out there that are more credible than places like CNN or Fox or whatever. The mainstream media is pure garbage, and they only like narratives that play into their favors. They're trash. Absolute garbage. Sitting here saying all these things around the sun because Trump got into office. Black men, Hispanic voters are racist and sexist. Oh, boo fucking who. Orange man bad made you cry. That's why we're getting this type of reaction. They're not even hiding the corruption anymore. Canada, 9 years under Trudeau. I believe this guy is a trucker, some sort of construction worker. I'm not entirely sure. Let's take a look at what he has to say here.
I was born and raised in a first world country, and I'm probably going to end my days in a third world country. And the sad thing is, it's the same country. Look at our political system right now. It's that of a banana republic. We have Attorney General says there's 186 conflicts of interest. They won't release any of the paperwork on that. All the Liberal appointees giving their buddies' companies millions. The $400 million fund that came out of is headed by the ethics commissioner appointed by Trudeau. You got to be kidding me. On top of that, we still don't know which MPs were guilty of foreign collusion in the last election and since. Their criminal justice system is a joke. The Liberal government's weaponized that system, made it into a political tool. It's just ridiculous. They're not even hiding the corruption anymore. The Foreign Affairs Minister, Jolie, her husband got $40,000 because he's an entrepreneur. Are you fucking kidding me? I don't know. I was born and raised.
There you go. There you go, Trudeau at his finest. Let's take a look at the House of Commons proceedings.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
I'd like to thank my colleague for his intervention today. I'd also like to take
Potential
a moment to recognize
anti-competitive behavior in Canada's something system.
I
think it's an e-transfer system.
A happy Lebanese Heritage Month, and I wanted to make
Not
sure
if that's exactly what it said. We'd have to wait.
And it brings me to my question. You know, one of the things that we've also seen is massive fees put on remittances that are sent around the world from Canadians who have family in other countries. I'm wondering if the member has any comments on that.
Anti-competitive behavior in Canada's e-transfer ecosystem report number 20.
As we look at
or
these
is that number 20? I don't even know. Standing Committee on Industry and Technology.
So as member opposite, I definitely want to take a moment to recognize the importance of Lebanese Heritage Month, and I myself went to the flag-raising ceremony here on Parliament Hill today, where there were many Canadians of Lebanese background who came to the raise of flag, along with parliamentarians of all stripes, which is so important. With respect to the question from the member opposite, I really think it's important that these questions are put into the committee itself, deeply there. So, and this is part of this whole debate, a commentary on this whole debate, that the real appropriate place for this debate is at the committee. That's where it belongs. It is the expert committee. It is part of Parliament, and that is where this debate should be situated and focused.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Government Deputy House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank my colleague for his speech today. Unfortunately, the reason, unfortunately, we haven't been able to get a lot of work done in this House in the last month or so because Conservatives are continuing to filibuster on their own motion. I'm wondering if he can...
Yeah, I've got some new slogans for Canadians. Cut the government, grab the money, and run. God, our country is falling apart right now.
To prevent actual work from this House occurring.
Brief answer, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
So I will differ a little bit with my friend in my own party. We do get work done in this House. It's just in this chamber right now, there is a stone wall because of the Conservative Party that is refusing to allow us to actually move ahead within this chamber. But where I differ is that we actually do get work done in this Commons, in the committees, and each and every parliamentarian is working hard. I can tell you, I'm working hard. Now we are at a stone wall because the Conservative Party is not allowing us to get the job, the work done that we need to get done. So I ask and plead, please let us do our work, Conservative Party.
Before I go to the next member, I just appreciate that the members want to see how much time they have, but they need to make sure that their alarms don't go off. They need to make sure that their phones are, and I'm speaking to everyone, that their phones are not on vibration because it also creates problems for the interpreters. So I just want to remind members to please be mindful about the location of their phone and what mode it's on. We need to make sure that the health and safety of our interpreters are first and foremost. Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And you know, it's been an interesting process over the last number of weeks. And for those that are trying to follow what's taking place, allow me to attempt to summarize it. Because what they're really witnessing is what I would suggest to you is a multi-million-dollar political game that's being led by the leader of the Conservative Party, because he has determined it's in his self-interest and the interest of the Conservative Party of Canada to continue playing this silly, expensive game, Madam Speaker, at a substantial cost. Because as opposed to participating in this filibuster, what we're actually witnessing, Madam Speaker, is an opposition party that I would ultimately argue is in contempt or nearing contempt of the House of Commons today. And it shouldn't surprise people, because the leader of the Conservative Party was the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who was held in contempt of Parliament, the first Prime Minister in the history of the Commonwealth, and the only one to date to this very day, Mr. Speaker. It speaks volumes in terms of the character and the personality of the leader of the Conservative Party today. So take a look in terms of what it is that they're doing. I don't say it lightly. In fact, I have recommended that every member of the Conservative caucus should actually read the Hill Times story that was published on October the 31st. It was written by Stephen Chaplin. Now, Stephen Chaplin is the former senior legal counsel in the office of the House Law Clerk and Parliamentary Counsel. And let me just quote two very important things that I think should be highlighted, because that is why we actually have the debate that we're having today, Madam Speaker. And I'm going to get into that very, very shortly. But here's what Stephen Chaplin has to say about this multi-million-dollar game that the leader of the Conservative Party is playing. And I quote, "It is time for the House of Commons to admit it was wrong and to move on. There has now been 3 weeks of debate."
It's Scary Kevin. I just want to thank you all for joining me today. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button if you are new. Let's get back into it.
It goes on, Madam Speaker. And here's where people really need to understand this point, because you get Conservative after Conservative talking, whether it's about this motion or the matter of privilege that they introduced 3 weeks ago, over 4 weeks ago. This is dated a week old, Madam Speaker. This is the Conservative Party says, just produce the papers, and then the issue will end. We cannot produce the papers. The Conservatives know that, Madam Speaker. Here's what Stephen Chaplin actually has to say on the issue in terms of the game that the Conservatives are playing. And I quote, "What do you say? It is time for the House to admit its overreach before the matter is inevitably finds its way to the courts, which do have the ability to determine and limit the House's powers," Madam Speaker, "often beyond what the House may like." This isn't me. This is a professional, someone that understands what's taking place on the House of Commons. It is the leader of the Conservative Party today that is using his opposition powers to prevent important things from taking place in the House, because it's in his self-interest, Madam Speaker, in the interest of the Conservative Party, not Canadians, that is being served by this tactic, not to mention the millions that is being thrown away. The Deputy House Leader earlier today talked about legislation. Take a look at what's on the order paper, that's been on the order paper for days now, Madam Speaker. The Citizenship Act. Citizenship is something that's important to Canadians. By not passing this legislation, some individuals are being denied their citizenship. C-66, the military court reforms, taking sexual abuse type of issues out of the military courts, putting it into the civil courts, Madam Speaker. C-33, the rail and marine safety issue, talking about economic supply lines. You want to talk about improving the economy? This is one of the things that we should be doing. My colleague emphasized Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act. Think in terms of pictures that are posted on the internet without consent from individuals over 18. Let alone the harms that's being caused to children. These are the types of substantial issues that we should be talking about and actually voting on and seeing go to committee. But instead, we're playing this game. Fast forward to today, when we talk about, here's a motion that's talking about banking and banking fees. I can assure members, Madam Speaker, that banking fees is a very serious issue. My constituents are concerned about the banking fees, whether it's using an ATM machine, the monthly charges that we get, the interests applied in many different ways, Madam Speaker. There's a litany of issues dealing with banking fees. I would love the opportunity to talk for 20 minutes plus on that issue. And the problem is, Madam Speaker, is that it actually feeds into what it is that the Conservatives are wanting us to do. It's interesting now, they're not only saying we want to take control over what's taking place on the floor of the House of Commons, they also now want to start dipping more and more, instructing from their position, from the Leader of the Conservatives' office, they want to now start instructing standing committees in terms of what it is that they should be doing. They've got the Bloc completely fooled on it. The Bloc are actually...
The closest thing we have to an actual right-wing party are the PPC, but even then, they lost their own riding back in, 2020, 2021? They came out swinging, they came out strong, but they don't have the support to actually overthrow the Liberals if they were to get voted in. There's not enough people to vote them.
Committee where it can be further studied, and by the way, call these witnesses, and there's a deadline date to get it back to the House. Madam Speaker, these standing committees can, in fact, call their own agenda items, determine who it is that they want to be able to call before them. They don't need to be, they don't have to be instructed by the Leader of the Conservative Party as to what it is that they should be doing. It's a very disturbing pattern that we've seen now, with 2 concurrence motions being brought forward by the Conservative Party. I would argue that ultimately it is the Leader of the Conservative Party now not only trying to dictate what we can and cannot talk about on the floor of the House of Commons, but now he's starting to reach into the different standing committees. If he just advised, say, well, look, send this back to the committee, or do what we usually would do, just vote concurrence on a report, and it goes on its way and allow the standing committee to do what it wants. But no. There is an agenda that's there, Madam Speaker. And it is a very selfish agenda that's being driven by the Leader of the Conservative Party and their House leadership team, Madam Speaker, at a substantial cost. As I say, it's a multi-million-dollar a day or a multi-million-dollar game that's being played, Madam Speaker. The Conservative leader needs to start putting the interests of Canadians ahead of his own self-serving interests and the interests of the Conservative Party, Madam Speaker. There's a lot more work that we can be doing on the floor of the House of Commons. We need to respect that standing committees do have the ability to do what is being proposed here, Madam Speaker. We need the Leader of the Conservative Party to stop abusing his authorities as a Leader of the Opposition, Madam Speaker. Reflect in terms of when he was a parliamentary secretary and his Prime Minister was held in contempt of Parliament.
Resuming, questions and comments. The honourable for South Shore, St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It really is quite humorous to hear the parliamentary secretary talk about fiscal responsibility. He's a member of a government that hasn't hit a single budget target and has added more debt to the government and Canada taxpayers than all other prime ministers since Confederation. But that aside, on the issue that he raises about process, perhaps since that member is not a member of the industry committee where this motion goes, he's not aware of the fact that the Parliamentary Secretary for Industry has been filibustering every motion that we bring forward on this study, whether it's document productions when he protects MasterCard from scrutiny, whether it's document production or more witnesses from Stripe, which has got the pseudo Minister of Finance on their board, Mr. Mark Carney. They're protecting their folks and stopping it from going. So we have to come to the House to get an order because that government won't stop filibustering.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Madam Speaker, Canadians and all parliamentarians of all political stripes need to be aware of the tactic that the Conservative leader is actually using. Think about it. In a simple motion, he wants to instruct, and it's not just one, Madam Speaker. This is just in the last 7 days, 2 that I'm aware of, and there's no doubt going to be others where they're saying.
And point of order, the Honourable for South Shore St. Margaret's.
The member is an experienced member and knows that you can't hold up props, and I believe that's what he just did.
Okay, I'm not sure what was on those documents, but if they were specific to, if they were the write-up on the motions themselves, if he's pointing to them, he knows that he's not to use them as prop. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary can finish his thought.
There's nobody here right now because we are just in the House of Commons proceedings. Question period will begin in roughly 40 or so minutes.
I can tell you that it is a scary situation when you have a leader of the official opposition abusing his authority to the degree in which we are witnessing today. It says a lot, heaven forbid, that he sits in the Prime Minister's chair when he will want to continue his control over standing committees. People need to be aware of that. That's why they put in deadlines, Madam Speaker. That's why they're dictating who appears before a proc. That is, I would ultimately argue, an issue that it doesn't matter which political party one's from, that we should all be concerned about. We should not be, standing committees should not be mandated and told by the leader of the official opposition in terms of what it is they will do.
Questions and comments? Honorable Député de Pierre.
The Honourable Member for Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
He definitely looks rough, that's for sure.
But properly in terms of the colleagues' indignation, he repeats it day after day for almost a month because the Bloc offered the government an exit door. We said, if you want us to move forward and unblock the situation, our proposal, which would be a win for Quebecers and even Canadians, would be to improve OAS for seniors 65 to 74 and also adopt our bill on supply management. And the government replied no to this. And then they accuse us to not give them a free pass, even though they didn't want to work with us. So, Madam Speaker, I don't understand why the government is indignant and is not trying to solve the situation, unless it's because at the end of the day, it suits them, because when the parliament is paralyzed, there's no confidence vote, and then they have no legislative program. So
it's all just for the political theater, Sandeep. That's all they want at the end of the day. That's all they care about, is dragging things on as long as they can. It's all about the political theater. The circus continues.
The Conservative Party and disagree with the RCMP of Canada, the Auditor General of Canada, other law experts that have indicated that what's being asked cannot be delivered. So we either have to agree with the Conservatives or listen to the experts, and we're going to listen to the experts. The other then option is that we need to have an opposition party that comes on side to help us get through the behavior that the Conservative Party is playing. And to date, we haven't gotten that type of support, so we continue to be held hostage to what it is, that multi-million-dollar game that the Conservatives have chosen to play.
For a brief.
Yeah, well, when it comes to signing something like that to get the security clearance, obviously they're going to be talking about information that is highly confidential and behind many levels of different security clearances, which is why he needs to get it, or why they want him to get it. So there's obviously going to be NDAs involved. He can't talk about these things. They're obviously going to not allow certain information to just get out into the public for everybody to know. Because at the end of the day, if they did, Canadians aren't the only ones watching this stuff, right? You got to keep that in mind. There's people from all over the world, different political leaders who probably have people keeping an eye on this stuff. So they're not just going to allow information of that level to be just talked about out in the open, even though they should be upfront and clear for Canadians. But in terms of national security issues, they probably can't. So yeah, there are NDAs, there are things that need to be signed in order for this to continue. They can't talk about it in public, which is why we are in a circus, which is why we are playing these games we are currently playing. Nothing is continuing. We've been talking about the SDTC for over a month now. $400 million of taxpayer money vanished. Trudeau mishandled it, misallocated it, gave it to liberal buddies and liberal backers instead of handling it properly. This is $400 million that the Canadians will never see again. It's long gone, I'm sorry to say. But everything is ground to a halt because of this issue as well. So right now we are just playing a game of theatrics. Nothing is happening.
To this place unappropriately dressed just to heckle me to go back. So if they want to come in and participate in the debate.
First of
I know the clearance is not mandatory. That's why he hasn't gotten it.
able to indicate whether someone has come in or exited, like specifically. I would just remind members to please be respectful to each other, and if they wish to have conversations across the way, then they should step outside and have those conversations. Step outside of the chamber, I mean. Just to be clear, the honourable member, South Shore St. Margaret's, if he wishes, he can start over. It's up to him.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, I have another point of order. The honourable member for Waterloo. I don't think they want to hear you. Order. Didn't recognize the honourable member. He should wait if he has a point of order. Order. The honourable member for Waterloo has the floor.
Madam Speaker, I really do not appreciate having comments about my attire and what I choose to wear. I do feel that I am appropriately dressed for this chamber. You've just recognized me. And I would also just like to put for the record, I have no problem with the member from Winnipeg North speaking and representing the views of Canadians in this House.
Point of debate. I would just, again, I've asked members to please be respectful of each other so that we can move on with the business. Another point of order, the Honourable Government Deputy House Leader.
Given the fact that the member has come into the House to display that she's not happy with the
member was in the House or not. So, the honourable member, parliamentary secretary.
Given the fact that the member has shown that she is concerned and that she is upset with the fact that the NDP member commented on her attire, perhaps it would be appropriate to ask the member from the NDP to rise to apologize to the member from Waterloo.
I go away for like 2 seconds, and what happened? People are making fun of each other. Is that really what we're doing right now? The point of order.
The issue, based on what I have actually ruled on, and as I said, if members want to have conversations, they can take it out. I just think that we need to be respectful of each other, and I would just hope that we are able to continue with the orders of the day without having to. Another point of order, the honourable.
Yes, where is Randy?
Madam Speaker, I do believe that it is inappropriate for another member to start talking about how another member is actually dressing. That is, in fact, inappropriate. And I would think the honourable thing to do would be ask the member to apologize. I don't think that he is the one that's the fashion guru and is inappropriate to be going around saying, oh, that member's not wearing what I believe. That should be...
This is our parliament at its finest right now, ladies and gentlemen. If you are joining us, we are talking about fashion and clothing in Parliament. Our government at its finest. This is what your taxpayer dollars are going towards. Oh my goodness.
For a withdrawal or an apology, she did mention that it.
Yeah, literally, cry some more. Boo hoo. Boo hoo.
We're going to go on with the orders of the day here, and which is the honourable member South Shore St.
Teacher. He said something that hurt my feelings. Please put him in timeout.
Order. The honourable member for South Shore St. Margaret's, if he wishes, he can restart, given everything that's taken place.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Usually all those points of order don't happen until I'm into my speech. But I'll do something unusual, as I said a few moments ago. I'm actually going to speak to the concurrence motion that's before the House right now, unlike most of the speeches today. And what we're here discussing is a motion to have a further study, a further detailed study on what are called the fees related to Interact. A lot of folks watching will use e-transfer, that thing where you send money to a friend or your kids through electronic banking. Well, we've discovered that there are perhaps what you might call usury or monopolistic fees happening. And we have a challenge in our economy right now. We're not very productive. We're losing our productivity over the last 9 years, and it's due to three main things. One, this country has too much debt. A lot of that debt generated, more than half of that debt generated by these Liberals in 9 years. That causes strains on our system. Two, we aren't selling enough of what we make to the world anymore, and most of those issues have been generated by the anti-development policies of this government that have squashed our resource industries, both renewable and non-renewable. And third, we have an oligopolistic economy, and that oligopolistic economy is the federal government.
Another point of order, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, and I am sorry to my honourable colleague.
What is going on?
But I think all women in this chamber now need to have the approval of the NDP to determine if my attire is now in order. Oh, okay.
It's making this a point of debate.
Are you for real right now?
I have already...
She cut him off to say that?
We'll be able to move on. The Honourable Member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
So what we have here besides interruptions is the issue that the Liberals don't want to talk about, which is why they're not doing anything about the oligopolistic economy, which includes the fees that Canadians pay for their banking services, and those fees in particular around a company called Interact. It's on the back of your card, and Interact is an association, but it's basically owned by the four big banks, RBC, CIBC, Scotiabank, TD, and then the fifth one, Desjardins. They own it. And what they do is they charge a fee for any time you move money around. They do about 19 million transactions a day in Canada, but one of those issues is moving your own money to somebody else, an e-transfer. And in that, you'll be shocked to learn, I'm sure, that the two companies that chair the board of Interact, which are RBC and TD, get a preferential rate over all other financial services companies. They only charge themselves or get charged themselves 6 cents a cost for that, while they charge smaller and smaller financial institutions, particularly those not part of the Interact board, almost 44 to 46 cents per transaction. And that's huge. Understand that there's a $1.50 charge on each end on that. It's a $3 charge technically if you don't keep a minimum balance in your account. You get a $3 charge from the banks. RBC, TD, and the big guys are only paying 6 cents for that transaction, so they're making a 98% gross margin. And if you're a small credit union and not part of the government-protected oligopoly of Interact, which has basically a complete monopoly on the movement of money in Canada, then you're out of luck and you're paying 44 to 46 cents to the big banks for this service that own Interact. And that's why we're here, because we had witnesses in committee that would refuse to table any of their fee structures, even though they're a protected government business. We had witnesses that came before the committee in the credit card study as well on the issue of what's called the interchange fee. This government made a big announcement. We're reducing the fees. We're reducing the fees that small businesses have to pay to credit card companies for every transaction. It's usually a percent, somewhere between 1% to 2.9% of the transaction. If you pay with your credit card fee, that small business has to pay to the big banks and the Visa card companies. And there are companies that are the pipe, the plumber of the system that do that. And one of them is called Stripe. Another one's called Moneris. Some may have heard of Moneris. They've agreed to the fee cut, the voluntary fee cut that the government asked. But this company called Stripe decided, no, we're not going to. And they said, oh, no, it's because we're being charged a new GST fee and we can't afford it. It actually is a GST fee that they were paying all along, but only because of a court action was it delayed for 12 months. But they use that as an excuse either because they're greedy or they're just not as efficient as the other providers of that service. You be the judge of which one it is. But one of the interesting things is the person on the board of Stripe, which is one of the biggest companies in the world at doing this, is Mark Carney, who is the special advisor to the Prime Minister on the economy. He's the boss above the Minister of Finance. And he's the next Liberal leader. This is the same fellow who's on the board of a company called Brookfield, who has just decided to move the entire company from Toronto to New York to avoid paying Canadian taxes. So while Mr. Carney preaches that Canadians should pay more for everything with a carbon tax, because carbon tax. Carney loves the carbon tax and thinks it should be 61 cents a litre. He moves all his business interests to the U.S. and he avoids the things that the Department of Finance is trying to do. This is the character of an individual who aspires to be Prime Minister of Canada, supposedly, but thinks it's better for the companies that he sits on the board of to dodge Canadian taxes and move to the U.S. and pay lower taxes. I don't know why carbon tax Carney wants to help the newly elected President Trump by moving his head office to New York. Apparently he admires him more than he admires the current Prime Minister. He wouldn't be doing this. So why is it that these Liberals continue to filibuster in committee to stop these examinations from happening? The parliamentary secretary for the Minister of Industry has done nothing but filibuster every time we bring up a motion to bring either carbon tax Carney or disclose the financials of MasterCard or disclose the financials of Stripe, which carbon tax Carney's on the board of. And he doesn't have the guts to vote against it. He just keeps talking and talking and talking and stopping from getting to a vote. So that's the reason we're in this situation now in the House, where we have to use the power of the majority of this House to try and get that study done, because the parliamentary secretary is too afraid of having this debate in committee. And it makes you wonder what it is that that individual is trying to cover up for the government in terms of preventing these studies from happening. And you know, we had one of the banking executives from RBC, who is co-chair of Interact and sits on their board, before committee, and one of our members asked him a number of times if he knew the fees of the company he's on the board of, that he represents his bank, that his bank actually owns, called Interact. And he said, I don't know the fees. Now, I've served on boards, private boards and Crown boards. I always knew what the fees were that the businesses I was on the board of. So it defied believability that this senior banking executive in Canada would not even know the fees that he charges or gets charged on Interact. And this is the kind of obfuscation that we see happening on this credit card study that has prompted this motion. In fact, all the banking heads were before the committee, and we asked them, look, I don't want you to betray your confidential commercial stuff, but you all judge yourselves publicly on something called return on equity. That's how much profit a year the company makes per share that shareholders own. And the companies overall, banks overall, are anywhere from a 10 to 15% return on equity. That means for a $10 share, they make $1 to $1.50 in profit a year, in that case, if it were 10 to 15%. We said, well, will you share that, what your credit card business is? What do you make in your credit card business? As a percentage, not the overall revenue numbers or not your expenses, but just share that percentage like you do on your overall business. That's all confidential. Of course it's confidential. Some of you may know that I used to work for a bank at one time, a long time ago. I had hair then. And when I worked for the bank on Bay Street, that bank had a return on equity of 52%. Some might call that loan sharking, but that's the level of return they get. That's why they don't want to do it. That's why this government doesn't want to do it. We had finance officials in industry committee this morning, and asked them, did they know those numbers on credit card business? They said they never asked. We had the senior finance officials in committee this morning and said, have you ever looked at the anti-competitive pricing of Interact and what they do between the owners, RBC, TD, Scotia, and CIBC, and what they give themselves as a cut rate versus all the other financial institutions? They said, no, we've never looked at it. I said, doesn't the Minister of Finance care about competitive behavior in the industry that she regulates? And they said, well, we don't look at it. That's somebody else's job. That's the Competition Bureau's job. Not my job to look at policy and decide whether or not the industry we regulate is competitive or not. I asked the same question about these great interchange fees and carbon tax Carney's company, Stripe, that's refusing to abide by the Minister of Finance's order. And do you look at anti-competitive behavior of the interchange fees? So not our job, not our job. We're just the government, nothing to see here. We're just the Department of Finance and the Minister of Finance. We're not concerned with competition. So that's the reason why we have an oligopolistic economy. You have a Minister of Finance and a Liberal government and a Department of Finance that doesn't care about the fact that we have an oligopolistic cell phone industry. We don't have a government that cares about the fact that we have a monopoly in banking telecommunications, and airlines. It's incredible the extent to which this government goes to protect their corporate buddies.
It's my duty to interrupt the proceedings at this time and put forthwith the question on the motion now before the House. La question est suivante.
The question is as follows. Ms. Rempel-Garner, seconded by Mr. Chambers, moved that the 20th report of the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology, presented on Friday, November 1st, 2024, be concurred in.
Amendment, Mr. Chambers, seconded by Mr. Perkins, moved the following amendment, that the motion be amended by deleting all the words after the word that and substituting the following. The 20th report of the Standing Committee. Shall I dispense? Yeah, dispense.
Just want to thank everybody for joining today. I cover House of Commons proceedings and question period whenever it is live. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button, turn the notification bell on if you want. Let's get back into it. Thank you for joining.
If a member of pursuant to Standing Order 45, the division stands deferred until the expiry of the time provided for oral questions later today.
With the remaining business under routine proceedings, we are now under the rubric of motions. Motions. Presenting petitions. Presentation. Oh, sorry. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader has a motion.
Yes, actually, on a point of order, it's a motion of sorts, I guess. Madam Speaker, there have been discussions amongst the parties, and if you seek it, I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following motions. First motion is that in accordance with subsection 4.1(1) of the Lobbying Act, RSC 1985 C44, fourth supplement, and pursuant to Standing Order 111.1(2), the House approved the reappointment of Nancy Belanger as Commissioner of the Lobbying for the term of 7 years.
All those opposed to what the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary is proposing will please say nay. Okay, the House has heard the terms of the motion. Is it all those opposed will please say nay. Agreed. Carried.
Secretary.
And thank you, Madam Speaker. And then secondly, I would ask that in accordance with subsection 54.1 of the Access to Information Act, RSC 1985 CA1, and pursuant to Standing Order 111.1(2), the House approved the reappointment of Carolyn Maynard as Information Commissioner for a term of 7 years also. And I would ask for unanimous consent.
All those opposed to the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary moving the motion will please say nay. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. All those opposed.
So during just House of Commons proceedings, not everybody shows up. It's typically question period when everybody starts to file in, and you'll see everybody start to show up. Question period is in roughly 20-30 minutes. People will start showing up very soon.
Of China. She's a practitioner of Falun Gong, which is the traditional Chinese spiritual discipline based upon meditation, exercise, and moral teachings, based on principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. Tens of thousands of such practitioners have been imprisoned, and the Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting have sponsored and been behind the petition of 1.5 million folks in 50 countries, bringing this to the attention of their governments. And so they are looking for a resolution to establish measures to stop the Chinese Communist regime's crime of systemically murdering Falun Gong practitioners for their organs, amend Canadian legislation to combat forced organ harvesting, and publicly call for an end for the persecution of Falun Gong in China. Thank you.
Oh. Presenting petitions. Présentation de pétition. The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a number of petitions to present to the House today. The first petition is from petitioners who believe that regardless of circumstances, it is always wrong to kill a child, and they are, as a result of that, deeply concerned by some of the discourse that has happened in this place, particularly proposals around the expansion of euthanasia to include, quote, babies from birth to 1 year of age. This was a proposal made by a representative of the Quebec College of Physicians, and this proposal for the legalized killing of infants as a further expansion to Canada's already extremely liberal euthanasia regime is certainly something that is a further source of concern for these petitioners. They call on the government to and the House to oppose this radical proposal to legalize the killing of small children in this country. The next petition is in support of Bill C-257. It's a private member's bill that stands in my name that would add political belief or activity as prohibited grounds of discrimination to the Canadian Human Rights Act. This is Bill C-257. This bill would protect Canadians from discrimination on the basis of their political views. Currently, while Canadians are protected in federal jurisdiction from discrimination on the basis of many different criteria, there is no protection against discrimination on the basis of political views, and this lack of protection can have a chilling effect when people maybe limit their public comments on issues that are important to them for fear that they might face professional or other forms of discrimination or retaliation. Petitioners call on the House to support Bill C-257 that would protect Canadians from political discrimination. The next petition is dealing with the persecution of Falun Gong practitioners. Petitioners, in the course of this petition, they highlight the history of the terrible persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in the People's Republic of China by the Chinese Communist Party, and they call on the House to take additional and stronger steps to try to combat the scourge of persecution of Falun Gong practitioners. Next, I'd like to table a petition regarding the human rights situation in Eritrea, as well as the implication of that situation for foreign interference here in Canada. Petitioners observe that Eritrea has been ruled by an authoritarian, brutal dictator under a totalitarian system for the last 30 years with no constitution, no elections, no parliament, no freedom of the press, no freedom of movement and association, that it has been called the North Korea of Africa, that many Eritreans have been forced to flee, have sought asylum in various places. There's now a large and very, very productive, well-respected Eritrean community here in Canada. But the Eritrean community in Canada continues to be concerned about the long arm of the oppressive Eritrean government and threats of foreign interference that affect even people living in Canada. Petitioners therefore call on the House and the government to strengthen engagement with Eritrean political and human rights activists and pro-democracy groups, to take a stronger role opposing the Eritrean government's human rights abuses and their support for Russia's neo-colonial agenda in Africa. Petitioners also want to see additional steps to ensure that those who are agents of the Eritrean government are not able to come to Canada and engage in political interference here. Petitioners are also calling for the release of a number of political prisoners in Eritrea, including Swedish Eritrean journalist Dawit Isaak and 11 imprisoned Eritrean parliamentarians. They're also calling for strengthened sanctions against human rights abusers in Eritrea. And I will leave it there for now. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Presenting petitions, présentation de pétitions. Questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I'd ask that all questions be allowed to stand at this time, please.
Agreed and so ordered. Orders of the day, ordre du jour.
Ordre du jour, orders of the day, privilege, resuming consideration of a question of privilege on failure to produce documents pertaining to the Sustainable Development Technology.
Looks like we're going right back into the SDTC. Classic circles being ran. How about we worry about Canada? I agree. We need to worry about what is going on here in our country. We need to stop funneling billions of dollars all over the world when all that money could be kept here, could be allocated to things here. Obviously, just throwing money at things doesn't fix it, but it's better than distributing it everywhere when we have our own issues to deal with here in Canada. And it's pretty bad right now. There's a lot going on here that needs to be fixed.
In my community and valuable members of society,
I was raised with those values and beliefs and understand the importance of supporting and giving back to my community. I have lived my whole life in the greater Elmwood-Transcona riding. I've had a chance to buy my first house in this community. I raised my son in the neighborhood that I grew up in. I supported and volunteered local community organizations and raised funds to support youth programs my son attended. I spent 16 years working for important nonprofit organizations that were dedicated to helping better the people. Organizations like the ALS Society of Manitoba, the Kidney Foundation, Children's Wish, which is now known as Make-A-Wish. I also worked for local community centers. Like many Canadians, I had 2 jobs to support my family. For the last 4 years, I worked as the executive director for the local business improvement zone, helping small and medium-sized businesses navigate a global pandemic while supporting and connecting with local social services groups. Social services groups are the backbone of community. They provide services to our neighbors where the government has fallen short. Madam Speaker, we are talking about local food banks, veteran services, youth programs, and so much more. I recognize that my experience brings a unique perspective in my new role. There are many community members that have dedicated their time and energy to making things happen in my neighborhood, and I am just one of them. I do, however, understand that with every fiber of my being, the struggles and preoccupations of my constituents face every day. I promise them that as a new member of Elmwood-Transcona, I will continue to advocate for my community and every member in it. As for today's topic, the question of privilege, we have been debating this since I arrived over a month ago. Nothing in this government has moved forward, and we are wasting Canadians' time and money. For months, I knocked on doors, I visited community members, and I listened to their concerns. Over and over, the same things came up. The exorbitant cost of groceries. People in my riding have been forced to choose between groceries and their prescriptions. A few short years ago, you could get a full cart of groceries for $100, and now you're lucky if you walk away with 2 small bags. Families need relief. We need action from this government now. My local food banks, like many across the country, are seeing a record number of people accessing them. In some cases, these are families who have 2 incomes, those who have never accessed food banks before. We even have one woman who donated just last year to the food bank and this year is now accessing it. Again, family needs relief. We need to see action today. They spoke a lot about the lack of affordable housing. Every month in Winnipeg, there are fewer and fewer affordable places for people to live. The cost of rent goes up and there is no increase to income. And although I appreciate the government push for more housing, I wonder what percentage will actually be affordable housing. Because, Madam Speaker, we don't need more $800,000 homes. We need homes in my riding that families can afford, and $800,000 isn't it. I was fortunate enough to be able to, as a single mom, buy my first home at 24. I was able to provide a home for my son so that he had a place to call his own. And now as my son enters adulthood and has a good trades job, he can't see that possibility in this economy. We need to stop greedy landlords. We need to ensure that builders are required to build more affordable homes for our communities, homes that the next generation can afford to raise their families in. And rounding out the top 3 is the current state of healthcare system in the riding and across the country. Manitobans are currently looking at a backlog of over 40,000 surgeries. We are also known across the country for having the longest wait times in our emergency rooms. What is this government doing to help Canadians access the healthcare that they need and deserve? Manitobans saw cutting and gutting of our healthcare system under the previous provincial Conservative government. The cutting of 3,500 healthcare workers and closing a very important emergency room in my riding. Our current NDP government in Manitoba is working extra hard to try and reopen those spaces, hire back those qualified staff, and manage the backlog. But we need to remember that quick cuts to save a buck today will have long-lasting effects on our country. We need to stop filibustering. We need to be making things happen for Canadians.
Crocodile tears from the crocodile lady. Look, at the end of the day, the NDP have put themselves over Canadians numerous times. Jagmeet could have voted a vote of non-confidence in Trudeau multiple times, but decided to go for his pension, his multi-million-dollar pension, over Canadians. We could play this game over and over again, but Canadians know the NDP is full of it, and we're just not listening. We're not buying it anymore.
Time and time again, and yet it's a flawed program under the Liberal government. Providing free birth control for over 9 million Canadians and diabetes medications for over 4 million Canadians. And yet there are still many drugs that could be added by the Liberals to help Canadians with the pharmacare program. New Democrats want to see a head-to-toe healthcare system that can affect and help everyone in every way. Yes. We also saw the creation of a national program to provide meals for children in schools so that they can focus and learn and give parents a break. And yet the Liberals are still falling short, as many schools in Manitoba who have started months ago still aren't seeing that meals being served. We need to invest more. We need to continue to do things like this. Madam Speaker, New Democrats are dedicated to helping improve the lives of Canadian families. And this Liberal government is still falling short. We need to do more. And in my community, we know the cost of Conservatives. Manitoba saw the cost of social services and community groups when they were cut. We saw the cutting and gutting of our healthcare system. We saw the short-sighted cuts, and we saw how it has affected us daily. We need to continue to fight for Canadians, because Canadians continue to struggle. Our youth continue to struggle. Our seniors.
If you think the NDP are doing a good job, go look at British Columbia. Go look at Vancouver, where it is the most expensive place in all of Canada to live. As a matter of fact, it's so bad that people are leaving. People don't want to be there anymore. David Eby gets back in, it's going to be a repeat of exactly the exact same 4 years before. NDP British Columbia is a prime example of what the NDP will do to the entire country as a whole if they ever got into power.
Mr. Blakey, it's not in my speech, but I'm going to tell you that Mr. Blakey honored my dad on April 16th of 2008, right here in the House of Commons, after my dad passed away. So I will fondly remember him for that.
And it's truly sad because BC is such a beautiful province. It truly is. And the sad truth, the sad reality is, it's just become Northern California. It's just become an extension of California.
I'm remiss if I didn't pay tribute to another great Blakey. My predecessor, Daniel Blakey, was a worthy successor as his father. He was brilliant, articulate, and an effective member for Elmwood-Transcona, and I thank him for his service in this chamber. Madam Speaker, taking my place in the chamber is a true honor, an honor that I don't take for granted. I'd like to thank the volunteers and voters for getting me here. I look forward to many other opportunities where I can bring a voice to my constituents in this chamber. I conclude my speech, Madam Speaker, with a simple promise. I will always work as hard as I can to advocate on behalf of my constituents. And I thank my colleagues for accommodating me today. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? Questions and comments? The honourable member for Fredericton.
Sincerely congratulate my colleague on her maiden speech in this chamber, and just welcome her. I welcome any strong woman to this place as an addition for all of us, and I also really echo the concerns that she brought forward in this chamber, and I look forward to working with her. I also want to continue to congratulate her predecessor, Daniel Blakey, as well. We certainly miss him. He's a giant from this place, and I know he's doing very well in his new role in Manitoba. So really just comments on congratulations, and I appreciate her words today. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I realized, and I learned this during the campaign, about how women only represent 30% of parliamentarians. So I feel privileged to be here as one of that 30%, and I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honour member for Portage-Lisgar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I just want to offer my sincere congratulations to our newest member from Elmwood-Transcona. We met, well, I was knocking on doors for the Common Sense Conservative candidate, but we met on the streets, and I really appreciate the campaign you ran, and I was not that long ago I experienced that range of emotions, and I thought you did a great first speech. In that speech, you did mention a few things about housing prices, the food price.
She was crying. She was crying pretty much her entire speech.
My question is, when you were at those doorsteps, did you hear any concerns about the rising cost of living due to inflation through overspending, the fact that we transfer less to the healthcare of our provinces than we do to pay off the interest on our debt, and of course the proposed quadrupling of the carbon tax?
I just want to remind both members that when they interact, they need to go through the speaker and not directly to the members individually. The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
I thank you for the question. Madam Speaker, reality is I heard on the doorsteps it was a lot more about groceries and the cost of, finding an apartment that they could afford. It was, people are just struggling day to day. And every little dollar, no matter how they can, is something that's really important to them. So that was something that I heard and something that we talked about quite a bit, about different ways that could happen. So that is something that I just continue to hear over and over again more. Thank you.
Questions and comments?
The honourable member for Shefford. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Elmwood-Transcona for her speech. First of all, obviously, as critic for status of women, I think it's important to recognize that we have one more woman here in this House in a context where we're worried about the 30% level for the next election, in a context where, with my colleagues in the Feminist Parliamentary Group, we're calling for more civility in this House of Commons and how we need to be examples to follow, because in the current climate with so much polarization and with so many political games that are blocking everything, women aren't motivated to get involved, Madam Speaker, in politics. So I would ask my colleague to, join us in continuing to work hard, because I'm not sure how we're going to be able to change the climate in this House of Commons and bring more civility so that we don't lose more women and hopefully see more women joining in the years to come.
The honourable for Elmwood-Transcona.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I feel very passionate about the fact that I am just a 30%er here as a woman. On the campaign trail, I had the opportunity to meet with young girls, teenagers, even girls in their early 20s who were wondering about what it would be like to join politics in this climate. I didn't decide to be a politician until I was 46, so I don't know if I would have had the strength to stand up here the same way at 20 with some of the atmosphere that's around here some days. So I can really appreciate that. I think we all got to work together and figure out a way and be nicer to each other in general. So thank you very much for the.
What does this have to do with the SDTC?
For New Westminster, Burnaby.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to congratulate the member from Elmwood-Transcona for her very heartfelt, passionate, effective speech. And I saw her firsthand on the doorsteps in Elmwood-Transcona. I had the privilege of door knocking with her. I saw how people reacted to her on the doorstep and how impressed they were with the fact that she was knocking on thousands and thousands of doors, talking to people about their concerns. She's mentioned some of the issues like dental care and pharmacare where the NDP has made a difference. In dental care, thousands of people in Elmwood-Transcona have already had access to dental care. Pharmacare is coming soon, the Manitoba government obviously stepping up. That'll mean for people with diabetes $1,000 or $1,500 a month that they will no longer have to pay for their medication and devices for diabetes. She has also mentioned the anti-scab legislation, but she talked about food price gouging and gas price gouging. And the fact that so many people are looking for affordable housing, and we know that the Manitoba government is doing its part, I just wanted to ask my colleague, should the federal government be really stepping up on all these issues beyond what the NDP has forced them to do so that people have a roof over their head, are able to put food on the table, and are able to go to the grocery store and not be gouged by the food giants?
The honourable member Elmwood Transcona.
I thank the member for the question. Yes, I think Canadians want action now, and they want things that are going to impact their bottom line and their pocketbook today, not tomorrow, not in 2025, not in the future. They need to be things that are going to impact them today, and their ability to save money and be able to do the things that they need to do, whether it be supporting their family with having a pantry full of groceries, or putting a roof over their heads, something that many of us in this room would take for granted. So I really appreciate the question, and I think that we need to come together and figure out a way to move forward to help Canadians.
Hear, hear.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I too would like to offer my sincere congratulations on the member for her maiden speech and for being elected in Elmwood Transcona. When I was first elected, one of the very first speeches that I gave in this chamber was about...
And all they talk about are dental plans when there are over 2 million Canadians lined up at food banks. It's like, do you really need dental care if you're not eating? Like, let's be real here.
Government corruption, government scandal. We see people that are taking taxpayers' money to further their own personal interests. She spoke very well about the issues that people are going through in her own riding. I'm just wondering if she could talk about how unfortunate it is that for her maiden speech we're talking about government corruption and scandal rather than ways that we could be furthering the country, much like I was when I gave my first speech in the House.
The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
I thank the member for his question.
She gonna start crying again?
The reality is, I just want to be a strong voice for Canadians and the people of my riding of Elmwood Transcona. And as much as I've enjoyed being here, we need to just move forward. We need to get back to government work and make things happen. And I'll keep repeating that over and over again. We need to make things happen for Canadians because they are desperate to have stuff happen where that they can see an actual impact. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member
My
for
goodness,
London
man.
Fanshawe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I also truly enjoyed the member from Elmwood Transcona speech. I've now known her a few weeks and have come to really appreciate her as a very genuine, caring member of Parliament, and I know that her constituents will truly appreciate that going forward as their representative. One of the things that she and I spoke about, and I would love to hear her further comment on this now, is on the campaign trail. She visited with some folks who were on the picket lines, and what it meant that she was there with them, what it meant that there are people in this place that are fighting for their collective bargaining rights, and how that's a big part of her community, and what she heard from them directly on that line. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
A brief answer from the honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I did have the chance to walk the line with Teamsters during the campaign, which is near and dear to my heart because my dad was from the same union, my brother now, so I had the chance to walk with my brother. I actually remember in 2008 walking with my son and my dad. And so it was great to be able to walk with those workers and hear their stories and their concerns about safety issues and those types of things that they have to think about day in and day out, and the ability to come home safe to their families. Over the weekend, had a chance to walk with the Canada Postal Workers in my riding who have the potential of going on strike. So that's something that is very near and dear to my heart. I just want to continue to be able to fight for workers across Canada, and most specifically in my riding of Elmwood Transcona.
Statements by members, déclaration de députés. The honourable member for Thunder Bay, Rainy River.
Madam Speaker, I'm proud to rise today to recognize and honor the life of a good Canadian, Michael Robert Elchuk, who everybody knew simply as Haas. Like the Bonanza character, Haas was a gentle giant of a man. A good Ukrainian boy, he grew up on a farm in Murillo. Haas loved cooking. He worked as a chef in Europe and various places in Canada before returning home to open up his own restaurant. Haas was a volunteer in a wide variety of community activities, none more importantly than his role as a volunteer firefighter with the Oliver Papoonge Fire and First Response. That's where I first met him years ago when he brought someone into the emergency room while performing CPR on them. That was Haas, always helping others. That's why he was such a beloved member of the community and why he'll be missed by so many people from Murillo, from Kekabeka, and from Thunder Bay. But most of all, he'll be missed by his loving family, his mother Betty, his sister Jean, and his brother Dennis. Thanks, Haas.
The honourable member for Portage Lisgar.
November is Diabetes Awareness Month, and this week my wife Kaylee and I met with Breakthrough T1D, formerly known as JDRF Canada, to discuss the challenges of living with type 1 diabetes. T1D is a chronic autoimmune disease that prevents the body from producing insulin. Kaylee was diagnosed just after her first birthday, and over the years we've witnessed remarkable advancements in treatment. In our meeting, two youth advocates, Sophia and Bennett, shared the daily struggles of managing blood sugar and what a cure would mean for them. They also spoke about promising research underway, including cell therapy, a treatment that could offer insulin independence by replacing damaged cells. Canada's own Frederick Banting and Charles Best revolutionized care for T1D by discovering insulin, saving millions of lives. Today, Canadian researchers are on the verge of another breakthrough, one that could change the future for the hundreds of thousands of Canadians that currently live with T1D. Insulin was discovered here in Canada, and I have no doubt that our brightest minds will continue to lead the way towards finding a cure. Thankfully, the future is hopeful for all those affected by type 1 diabetes.
The honourable member. Uh-oh, Greg is here.
Mr. Speaker, I remember the first time I visited the office of the Premier of New Brunswick. I was met with a wall of framed portraits, not dissimilar to this house, where all the faces represented were men.
That's how you know question period is coming up very soon, when Greg, big bad Greg, has entered the building. Man, statements by members, what is the point of this? This is just a time frame where they can all just say whatever the heck they want freely. Speaking about whatever they please freely. Like, we're paying you guys to work. You guys are working on taxpayer dollars here. What are you doing? What are we doing here?
Ask in and be a part of something truly unforgettable.
Enough of the theatrics, enough of the statements. Let's get going.
Families across the province. I want to thank all involved in this transformational moment, as well as Premier Holt and her family for stepping up when we needed them most. It's a new dawn in New Brunswick, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During this Veterans Week, after paying tribute last week to those who participated in 2 world wars and the Korea War, I'd like to pay tribute to modern veterans, people who are all too often forgotten. These men and women have overcome considerable challenges, whether it's on the battlefield or in terms of peacekeeping or in responding to natural disasters. Their services go well beyond conflict regions, and their contributions are crucial to the security and well-being of communities across the world. They have sacrificed their health and efforts and missed key moments in their personal lives to defend the values of peace and to defend our freedom that is so precious. Now it is up to us, Mr. Speaker, to take care of them and to ensure that they have access to health care that is adequate and to provide support when they return to the labor force. Thank you for your service, dear heroes.
The honourable member from Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, today on November 7th, we remember and honor the sacrifices of Chinese railroad workers who, against extraordinary hardship, helped to build Canadian Pacific Railway. This railway was essential to Canada's confederation, ensuring British Columbia's entry and connecting our nation from coast to coast. This date makes the completion of the railway in 1885 a feat that would have been impossible without the efforts of over 17,000 Chinese workers who faced grueling conditions, low wages, and unfair treatment, risking and giving their lives to bringing this national vision to life. Their contribution, often overlooked, are a cornerstone of our shared history. Already proclaimed by cities of Toronto, Edmonton, and Ottawa, we commit to ensuring that this day will be officially recognized as Chinese Railroad Workers' National Memorial Day across Canada, preserving their legacy in our national memory. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the Green Slush Fund scandal is growing again. Yesterday's Journal de Montreal revealed that the Minister of the Environment has interests in a Montreal investment firm that benefited from the Green Fund money. From 2020 to 2021,
the Green Fund money.
$10.4 million in federal money was paid to 4 companies in which the minister has personal interests. The more you look, the more you find close ties between the Green Slush Fund and Liberal insiders. But now we're moving to a new level. These funds are going directly to the minister's financial interests. Mr. Speaker, this scandal shows a Liberal ploy to pay money for themselves instead of fighting for the environment, as the Green Fund was supposed to do. Canadians from coast to coast are disillusioned with this Liberal government and want an election as soon as possible to cut the taxes, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
The honourable member from Yukon.
Mr. Speaker, courage, solidarity, giving and hope. These are the values that members of UK, the Ukrainian-Canadian Association of Yukon, are showing as they embark on a heroic journey to deliver medical supplies to the front line of Ukraine's fight against Putin's ruthless and illegal invasion. 4 dedicated individuals, Grant Zazula, Lesia Nachu, Anastasia Matlashevska, and Eileen Melnichuk will carry over 20 suitcases to Ukraine filled with everything from antibiotics to first aid supply to warm socks. Thank you to each Yukoner who has contributed, as well as all the volunteers who have worked tirelessly to gather resources and support for this mission. Thank you, UK, for standing with Ukraine during these challenging times. Indeed, it is incumbent on all of us to act against the dark forces that threaten democracy and work together towards the peace that the world so desperately needs. Safe travels and success to the team. May your journey bring hope and healing to those who need it most. Slava Ukraini.
From Winnipeg South.
Mr. Speaker, as the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg South, I am proud to represent a large and growing Indo-Canadian community where Sikh and Hindu families live side by side in harmony as neighbors. Unfortunately, there are those who seek to promote extreme views, create division, and sow discord. Let me be clear. There should never be disruptive protests at places of worship like we saw recently in Brampton and Vancouver. The defacing of Hindu temples, as we have regrettably seen at the Baps Mandirs in Toronto and Edmonton, is absolutely unacceptable. As well, inflammatory statements and incidents of grave violence targeting Sikh Canadians have no place in our country. Acts of hate and the creation of disharmony do not reflect the Canada we know and love, a multicultural mosaic that is the envy of the world. In Winnipeg South and beyond, Mr. Speaker, let us work hard to foster unity, keep communities members safe, live together in peace, and build a better Canada for all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Saskatoon University.
Love it or list it. When the Prime Minister's old media buddy, Tom Clark, got to New York, he was disgusted with the 2,700 square foot cramped penthouse condo on Park Avenue with only 12 rooms and 5 bedrooms. Tom took one look at the dump and called his
the $9 million bathtub.
property B listed. What's on Tom Clark's must-have for his New York penthouse condo? Well, Italian marble, of course, a handcrafted copper soaker tub, a $5,000 coffee machine, and yes, even a golf simulator. I'm sure the Prime Minister's media buddy Tom Clark loves his new $9 million penthouse condo, but ask anyone who's living in the 1,400 homeless tent encampments in Toronto, or the millions of Canadians that can't afford a home. You know what they say? List it.
Yeah. Well done, Corey.
The honourable member from Hamilton Mountain.
This Veterans Week, I want to thank all those who have served and all those who continue to serve in the defense of our country. 2 weeks ago, we marked 10 years since Corporal Nathan Cirillo was senselessly gunned down while on sentry duty in Ottawa at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. That morning, I walked over to the War Memorial to pay my respects to this brave Hamiltonian, a Class A reservist of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, and I was flooded with memories from the day he died when I spoke with many Hamiltonians in my capacity as a journalist, and the anguish was intense across the city. When I arrived at the memorial, I found myself amid a throng of Argylls from Hamilton here in Ottawa to continue their duty. Some of them had been close to Corporal Cirillo and knew him well. Again, we were overcome with emotion. Hamilton will never forget, Speaker. I want to thank the Argylls for their ongoing service to our country, and I look forward to seeing them again on Sunday for the Garrison Parade.
The honourable member from Regina Leuven.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 long years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. The Prime Minister has taken his anti-energy crusade to a whole new level after recently announcing his oil and gas production cut. This job-killing policy will result in sending jobs to the United States along with $700 million that will go to build pipelines in America. The NDP Liberals are creating more powerful paychecks. Unfortunately, it's for U.S. oil workers, steel workers, and truck drivers. The government's own analysis admits that their cap on production will cost thousands of jobs and billions of dollars, destroying Canadian paychecks. Here at home, Canadian workers are getting poorer and can't afford to put food on the table or a roof over their heads. The NDP Liberals have no plan for the environment, and their cap on production will only perpetuate the economic vandalism they've caused. It's time for a carbon tax election now.
The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents have told me in no uncertain terms that they want a carbon tax election. There is only one person left who prevents that by keeping this Prime Minister in power, and that person is the leader of the NDP. The same leader of the NDP who made a big stunt when he told Canadians he had ripped up his coalition deal with the Liberals. It was a perfectly timed scam on voters in Elmwood, Transcona, right before a by-election. The leader of the NDP even went so far to say, and I quote, "The fact is the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people," end quote. But if the Liberals are so weak, why has the leader of the NDP voted for the carbon tax over 24 times? Why does he support his inflationary deficits, including wasteful spending like the Prime Minister's Arrive scam app? Why does the leader of the NDP support the Liberals' soft-on-crime policies that have led to a 50% increase in violent crime? Every day this Prime Minister remains in power is because of the leader of the NDP. It's time for the leader of the NDP to stand with Canadians. Instead of this Liberal government, call a carbon tax election.
The honourable member from Surrey Centre.
Mr. Speaker, veterans often see music as a profound way to express themselves and heal from the impacts of military service. That's why last year Veterans Affairs Canada hosted its first ever open mic night. This event brought together veterans, family members, active service members, and music lovers. It was so successful that the idea expanded with events happening across the country, including Victoria, in Montreal later this weekend, and right here in Ottawa tonight. I invite all members of this House to join with us tonight at the Warrant Officers and Sergeants Mess Hall to celebrate the healing power of music. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from London Fanshawe.
November is is Lebanese Heritage Month, and I am fortunate to work with many Londoners of Lebanese heritage who make our city better. To name only a few, Mike Ramal, a small business owner in London South, Sergeant Ziad Zabian from the London Police Service, Majida Zabian, a leader from Cedars of Hope, Dr. Munir Al-Qasim, our local imam, Dr. Majid Fiania, a physician in internal medicine, and Nadine Abirad, who works in my office and fights for my constituents every single day. I am so grateful to you all. I've witnessed that Lebanese Canadians always seem to find each other. They share a solidarity that has been built through hardship and war, and they continue to show remarkable resilience and the truest pride in being Lebanese. The Lebanese community is hurting. I see the pain in their eyes every day, and I see the worry about friends and family, and I want them to know that I stand with them. We must never stop demanding a ceasefire for an arms embargo and peace in the region. And while this may hold cold comfort to so many at this time, I hope you will be able to celebrate this Lebanese Heritage Month.
How about no?
While we're looking to Americans to show solidarity with women, let's not forget the Iranian women who are fighting for their rights. Let us keep in our hearts Ayou Darei, the new heroine of the resistance. Confronted by the morality police about wearing the veil, she instead stripped naked in front of misogynist authorities with dignity, pride, and courage before being arrested. Her fate remains unknown, but our thoughts are with her. Our hearts also go out to 16-year-old Arazu Kavari, who took her own life after being harassed for dancing without a hijab. 2 years after Maha Amini's death, Femme Vie Liberté movement is still burning despite the bloody repression. These women deserve our support in their fight against Islamism and in their fight for freedom. We need to learn lessons about the value of this freedom, which we often take for granted. Let's stand together and be uncompromising. Today, more than ever, women, life, and liberty.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Under these Liberals, well-connected government elite insiders have been pretending to be Indigenous in order to take contracts intended for Indigenous peoples. But up until today, we didn't know just how high the rot went. Today, the Liberals' Indigenous contracting scandal just got a bit...
Wait, so you're telling me I can't just identify as a native one day and get money from the government? Wild.
In order to get government contracts. Recall that when text messages came out about someone named Randy directing the affairs of the company
it's
in violation
Randy.
of ethics laws, the minister's partner
We're going
claimed that
back
it was
to the
someone
Randy
else named
convo.
Randy. He later admitted that was false, but said the references to Randy were the result of autocorrect. In order to help get government contracts, they invented another Randy and they pretended he was Indigenous. Here's the bottom line. Indigenous peoples in Canada have tragically high levels of poverty. This privileged elite minister's fraudulent company tried to grab contracts that the government had promised to Indigenous peoples by pretending to be Indigenous. It has never been more clear that this minister and these Liberals are only in it for themselves.
Yeah. The honourable member, l'honorable député de...
The honourable member for Longueuil, Charlemagne.
Mr. Speaker, as we pause this week to honor the brave men and women who have served our country, I'd like to pay tribute to Private Leonard William Elliott, a Canadian infantry soldier who fought in the First World War. Private Elliott was one of the more than 650,000 Canadians and Newfoundlanders who courageously answered the call to defend the values of freedom and peace in the war that was meant to end all wars, and one of the more than 66,000 who never came home. Mr. Speaker, he was also my great-grandfather. Leonard was killed in action in August 1917 in the Battle of Hill 70, leaving behind a wife and 5 children, among them the 6-month-old daughter he would never meet, my grandmother Edith. Like so many others, he left his home and family, stepping into the unknown to protect a future he would never see. He fought not just for his generation, but for every generation to come. I had the honor of visiting my great-grandfather's grave in northern France in 2017. I was the first family member to do so, 100 years after his death. The solemn promise I made that day was to ensure that his memory and his legacy would live on, lest we forget.
Questions orales, oral question.
Question period. It looks like Scheer is going to be leading the brunt today.
Of brutal assaults on Canadian energy workers, the Prime Minister just delivered a knockout punch with a production cap on oil and gas development here, which his own department admits will kill jobs and drive investment south of the border. Canadian energy company Enbridge just announced a $700 million project in the U.S. The Prime Minister is creating powerful paychecks for American workers while Canadian workers can't afford their mortgages or food. It's completely baffling why he would kill jobs here just to see them created down south. Is he getting some kind of a commission from the U.S. energy lobby for all the business he's sending them?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, what the member opposite is saying is simply not true. It's a cap on pollution, Mr. Speaker. In fact, production is going to go up 16% by 2030, and companies in Alberta, in the oil sands sectors, are making billion-dollar investment to make sure that workers in Alberta have a future and the energy sector has a future, and we can fight climate change at the same time, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
It's a cap on production, and his own department says it will kill jobs. And let's listen to something else that their own officials are saying. The Prime Minister's own Environment Commissioner has blasted the carbon tax as a failure. Here's some of his conclusions. Quote, the government has not made sufficient progress to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And quote, Canada remains the worst performer among all member countries of the G7. Every time the Prime Minister makes the carbon tax go up, Canada's climate performance goes down. Yet he keeps doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So why won't he call a carbon tax election so Conservatives can stop his insanity?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party of Canada is talking about climate change. We should note this somewhere in a book because it doesn't happen very often. If only they would talk about the fact that for 10 years they did nothing, which is why we had to pick up the slack from what they, when we came into power, emissions were going to overshoot 2030 by more than 30%, Mr. Speaker. Emissions are down by 8% because of our plan, the lowest emissions in 25 years, no thanks to the Conservative Party.
Encourage all members, please, to not take the floor unless they're recognized
starting
by the
off
Speaker.
early, Greg.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
Pick up the slack. Under their policies, Canada keeps falling on performance indexes. The only thing this carbon tax is doing is making Canadians poorer, and the results are devastating. A damning new report from the Salvation Army shows the human suffering this Prime Minister is inflicting on Canadians. Let's look at the report. First-time users of food banks shot up this year from 43% to 58%, and 1 in 4 parents are eating less so their children can eat. This is in Canada. How can he be so cold-hearted? Why won't he at least let Canadians decide in a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Economic Development in Quebec.
Mr. Speaker, do you know who has an inferiority complex in this place?
Trudeau.
It's the Conservative Party, because Canada has the lowest inflation. Interest rates are going down. Not only are we helping Canadians in need, we're building housing, we've got the family benefits, and the only ones in this place with an inferiority complex about Canada's economic resiliency is the Conservative Party. The Honourable Member for Maiden. The Prime Minister, supported by the Bloc, we learned today that our greenhouse gas emissions records are not reliable. And this Prime Minister contributed to doubling the price of food and rent, while at the same time not succeeding in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. They've not met any of their targets. When will the Prime Minister call an election so that we can cut taxes? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, you're going to have to put this on your calendar. The Conservatives have raised the question of climate change. They did nothing. while they were in office. Nothing for energy efficiency, nothing for electrification of transit. The Conservatives did nothing. Their record was not good. Canada has had the best plan in recent years for reducing emissions, and it's certainly no thanks to the Conservative Party. They have no plan for the environment, no plan to protect Canadians, and no plan for national security.
And you guys had no plan for Jasper.
I think the minister should read the Commissioner of the Environment's report. It's clear. Reductions are not attributable to any steps taken by the government. The Liberal environment policy is not a policy. It's just a plan for the environment. It's just a plan to tax. The Liberals, Canada under the Liberals has the worst record for emissions reductions. When will the government stop punishing Canadians so that we can finally cut taxes after an election? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. It's incredible what the Conservatives are willing to say. They've got their heads in the sand. Insurable costs for Canadians for the impact of climate change were $7 billion in June and August. It's unprecedented. And what would the Conservatives do? Just let the planet burn. They have no plan to fight climate change, no plan to create...
Oh, let the planet burn, huh? That's rich coming from you.
Protect Canadians, their drinking water and their health. It's a true disgrace.
What a deranged, out of touch idiot.
Floor over to the Honourable Member for La Prairie. I'd just like to remind members not to talk while the Speaker has the floor.
Colleagues,
the Honourable
please.
Member for La Prairie.
Colleagues, please.
Mr. Speaker, what farmers feared has happened in the Senate. Senator Peter Harder tabled an amendment to C-282 that prevents the bill from protecting supply management. Harder's amendment renders the bill inoperative for all renegotiations of existing trade deals. In other words, the Senate is doing Donald Trump a favor. He wants to attack supply management as soon as 2026 by renegotiating CUSMA. Peter Harder and Peter Boehm don't work for our agriculture. They work for Trump. Will the leader ask senators to defeat the amendment? The Honourable Government House Leader in the House. Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We agree with the bloc. Bill C-282 on protecting supply management is important, and I'm disappointed with the senatorial committee who voted against the bill and who moved that amendment. And I would call on senators to respect the will of the House, and I would call on all senators to vote against the amendments and to support our farmers who are there to feed Canadians and who contribute a lot to our economy.
Yeah, I don't know if the carbon tax is helping farmers at all, but you can continue to think that if you'd like.
Harder and Beam confirmed that from the outset, all they wanted to do was kill C-282. Their amendment virtually guarantees that supply management will be sacrificed again in the CUSMA renegotiation with Trump. They're attacking the all-party vote of this place. They're attacking 6,000 companies and 100,000 jobs in Quebec. They want to weaken our regions, ruin our producers, and weaken our agricultural model. I call on the leader, but this applies to all parties. Will the Senate leader ask senators to vote against this sabotage? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, indeed, we are calling on senators to support the bill in its original form. It's very important to support and protect supply management. That has been the Liberal Party and government's commitment. We created supply management, and we will keep defending it. And I hope that the Conservative Party will also encourage Conservative senators to vote in favor of the bill in its original form. The Honourable Member for La Rosemont, La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government's record on the environment is pathetic. We're in a climate crisis, and the Liberals aren't getting the job done. The minister announced regulations to cap emissions from the oil and gas sector that'll take effect in 2030 in order to reach our 2030 targets. Today, the Commissioner of the Environment just confirmed that the Liberal plan isn't working. In fact, Canada comes in last in the G7. Will the minister finally do his job, or should he go back to climbing the CN Tower? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I would encourage my honourable colleague from Rosemont La Petite Patrie to truly read the Environment Commissioner's report. It shows that Canada's measures are working. We have the best performance from 2017 to 2021 among G7 countries. It's true the Conservatives hadn't done a very good job before that, so it was an easy act to follow. But this is the first time in Canadian history that greenhouse gas emissions have been going down when the economy is going full tilt. And that's thanks to the system we put in place.
Naimo Ladysmith.
Canadians deserve better than that excuse. Mr. Speaker, another climate report, another massive Liberal failure. Canadians are terrified of the impacts of the climate crisis. They need action. But today's report has given the Liberals a failing grade. We have the worst climate record in the G7, while this government caves to the biggest and richest polluters. And the Conservatives, well, they will always put the interests of the rich before the planet.
Absolutely.
When are the Liberals going to stop putting oil and gas CEOs ahead of Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
One of the key measures, Mr. Speaker, of our climate change plan is putting a price on pollution. And on May 8th, the member from Rosemont La Petite Patrie said, and I quote, "This is why New Democrats, as progressive and environmentalists, are in favor of putting a price on pollution." Well, Mr. Speaker, I guess that under the pressure from the Conservative Party of Canada, the NDP are no longer progressives and they're no longer environmentalists. On this side of the House, we will continue to fight for climate change. We will continue to fight for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Last week, the government's own data revealed that oil and gas is the only sector of the economy showing signs of life. And on Monday, the NDP Liberals announced a job-killing cap on oil and gas production. The government's own analysis admits that their cap on production will cost thousands of jobs and billions of dollars, destroying Canadian paychecks. No wonder Canadian-based Enbridge is building a $700 million pipeline in the United States. This Prime Minister is creating powerful paychecks for American energy workers and American steel workers, while Canadian workers can't afford their food or rent. Why is this Prime Minister driving investment jobs away from Canada towards the United States?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, what the member is saying is simply false. It's a cap on pollution. Pollution is a bad thing, something the Conservative Party of Canada should understand. You want to talk about investment? Let's talk about a $2 billion investment that Strathcona, an oil company in Alberta, is making in Canada to make sure that workers in Alberta and the energy sector can have a future in a carbon-constrained world, something the Conservative Party of Canada is incapable of understanding, Mr. Speaker.
It's so weird that they want oil and natural resources to do well here in Canada while applying a tax that goes against natural resources and oil in Canada. I don't understand what their whole thought process is behind that. They think they're helping. Oh, Greg's laying a major smackdown.
From Edmonton Manning, please, to allow the responses to be given until the Honourable Member is recognized. The Honourable Member from Battle River.
Yeah, but I don't understand that. I don't get it.
Mr. Speaker, that minister may not understand how the energy industry works, but Canadians do. Regardless of the name, this cap is going to drive investment out of Canada, costing Canadians their jobs. It's been 9 long years of a Liberal government bent on destroying the Canadian energy sector, despite the industry being the biggest driver of the Canadian economy and employing hundreds of thousands of Canadian workers. So I'll ask the question again. Why is that extremist minister and that Prime Minister helping Donald Trump create American jobs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Foreign direct
investment, Mr. Speaker, is up in Canada. Investors are coming to Canada because we provide stability. We provide opportunity. Mr. Speaker, Canada has a long-standing history of standing up and protecting Canadian workers. And when it comes to the last NAFTA negotiations, it was the Conservative Party of Canada that asked us to back down. Well, we didn't, Mr. Speaker. We stood up for steelworkers. We stood up for our auto workers. We stood up for our agricultural workers and our farmers, Mr. Speaker, and we'll do it again.
I don't know. I got family members who work at Ford plants, and right now they're not working. They're not working at all because of the government.
NDP Liberals are not worth the cost as they continue to crush the Canadian energy sector. This week, they announced their job-killing oil and gas production cap. Enbridge, a company based in Calgary, is taking their $700 million investment out of Canada to build a pipeline in America. That's jobs and powerful paychecks for American pipeliners, for American engineers, and for American truckers. Why is the Prime Minister so focused on creating powerful paychecks for Americans and not for Canadians?
That's what I want to know.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Consult experts that disagree with them, but recently their go-to guy, Sylvain Charlebois, said climate change is the agri-food sector's greatest challenge and agreed that climate change is a major driver of food price inflation. So if Conservatives actually cared about elevated food prices, they'd have a plan to address climate change, but they don't. They've got nothing. No plan to address the biggest challenge in the agri-food sector, no plan to address the biggest driver of food price inflation. Now, are they going to start attacking this expert too?
Yeah.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Mr. Speaker, it's time for the Liberals to get back to the real world where Canadians are struggling to eat, heat, and house themselves. While the minister tries to claim that the production cap is going to create thousands of jobs, his own department is saying that's going to cost the Canadian economy billions of dollars and that we're going to lose thousands of jobs. The Canadian oil and gas industry already provides powerful paychecks for our people. So why is the Prime Minister so hell-bent on destroying those powerful paychecks and giving them to Americans?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
We love powerful paychecks, Mr. Speaker. Actually, wages have outpaced inflation in Canada for the last 20 months, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite wants to talk about the United States. Well, I've got some information for him. Last week, the economist David Rosenberg said U.S.-based investors should strongly consider moving from New York to Toronto, Mr. Speaker. Now, I am not a Leafs fan, Mr. Speaker, but I happen to agree with that economist, and I know that investors right around the world are looking to Canada.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton, Wetaskiwin.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost. The government's own analysis admits that their cap on production will cost Canadians thousands of jobs and billions of dollars. Meanwhile, we have a Canadian company who can't get a pipeline approved in Canada, investing $700 million in a U.S. project. And get this, in 2023, they increased oil and gas imports to Canada with over 40 million barrels shipped across the Atlantic from Nigeria and Saudi Arabia alone. Why is this Prime Minister so intent on funding powerful paychecks in the U.S. and everywhere else while Canadians struggle to afford food and housing?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Innovation.
Speaker, I know Conservatives like to cherry-pick per capita measures that try and talk down the Canadian economy. But in fact, if you look at per capita foreign direct investment, Canada is #1 in the world, ahead of Brazil, ahead of the United States. If you look at the IMF's projections of growth in Canada, our GDP is projected to grow more in the year 2025 than any other G7 country. We will not apologize on this side of the House for being optimistic about Canada's future.
The Honourable Member for Coast of Bay, Central Notre Dame.
After 9 years, the NDP...
Guys, we are on par. Our GDP is on par with Alabama. We are not doing good.
Energy NL says it was not unexpected, pointing to a complex, inconsistent... Get rid of that stupid cap so that we can export Canadian oil and gas instead of jobs.
I'd just like to encourage members to be judicious in their use of language. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
50%, Mr. Speaker, 50% higher. Now, what is that, Mr. Speaker? It's the imports of foreign oil into Canada when the Conservatives were in government than we are, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to standing up for our industries, whether it's the energy sector, whether it's steel workers, whether it's agricultural workers, Mr. Speaker, there is one party in this House that does that consistently. It is the Liberal Party of Canada. The Conservatives say, give it all away, and we will not do that. We will always stand up for Canadians, our workers, and our economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean. The Liberals claim they're prepared for a wave of immigration caused by Donald Trump's deportation threats. But to be ready, you'd have to be watching the borders. Under the Safe Third Country Agreement, anyone who crosses the border secretly can make a refugee claim in Canada after 14 days.
What?
However, since the end of Roxham Road, the vast majority of RCMP officers have been redeployed. While there were 100 of them at the time to cover 160 kilometers around Roxham Road, Radio-Canada revealed that as of June 29th, there are now only 6 of them left. How many border agents are there today?
We don't even have borders with what he just said. People can just come across it and in 14 days become a... What?
The RCMP commissioner and the Quebec commander were both very clear. There has been no reduction in RCMP staffing in Quebec. In fact, we've invested more in the RCMP and CBSA. I have every confidence in their ability to deal with any contingency at any time. That's their job, to be ready and to foresee circumstances at the border. That's precisely what they're doing. We have to have confidence in their preparation and in their work. The honourable member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, Quebec is so concerned that they're considering policing the border themselves. This morning in committee, the Minister of Public Security told me he was surprised that François Legault would want to send officers to the border because it's purely and completely a federal responsibility. Well, that's the problem. It's federal jurisdiction, but the feds don't seem to have a plan for the border. Nature abhors a vacuum, so with the federal government nowhere to be seen at the borders, Quebec needs to react. What's the plan and how many more officers are being deployed? The Honourable Minister of National Security. Mr. Speaker, I greatly appreciate the question from my colleague. In fact, I enjoyed our exchange earlier in committee. We talked about this very question. I reassured the committee, and my colleague was there, that the RCMP and Border Services are ready for any contingency. There are plans in place. They've been there for months. I think we need to have confidence in them and understand that giving the details of operational plans for politicians to do that on the floor of the House of Commons would be very irresponsible. The honourable member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. As if there weren't already lots of reasons to doubt the federal government's readiness, listen to this. This morning in committee, the minister told me we shouldn't imagine hundreds of thousands of arrivals before that becomes a real threat. Mr. Speaker, he says he's ready to wait until it becomes a threat before doing anything. He even told us there was no hurry because Trump doesn't take office till January. Mr. Speaker, this isn't the National Improv League, it's government. It's their job to see crises coming. When are they going to do what needs doing?
It's right now. Question period is right now.
Of immigration and citizenship. I thought the Bloc, and rightly so, was concerned about the CAQ policy of scaremongering. But here they are back at the charge. We have always been monitoring the borders, but I think everyone understands that it would be pretty amateurish of us.
Okay, so hold the phone here. We have a thing called the Safe Third Country Agreement, STCA, between Canada and the United States. It prevents people from applying for asylum within 14 days of entering the country. But if you are not detected for 14 days, you can make a refugee claim and you will not be assessed under the STCA rules. So, people are illegally crossing into the States and are now going to most likely try to cross into Canada, and will go undetected for 14 days and then can apply for asylum or refugee.
Energy efficiency, no measures for transit, no measures for electrification of transportation, no measures for renewable energy. This has changed since 2015.
I just Googled it. I just searched it up. It's a real thing.
2030 targets by at least 30%. We're 7% below 2005 levels. That's because of what we've been doing. It's about climate, it's about jobs, it's about the economy, and it's about the safety of Canadians.
It's called the Safe Third Country Agreement. You can go Google it.
Mr. Speaker, we can't believe a word the Liberals say on environment. Even the Environment Commissioner revealed the Liberals misled Canadians on their emission claims. He stated, quote, "The recent decreases to projected 2030 emissions were not due to climate actions taken by governments." While the Environment Minister punishes Canadians with a carbon tax, Canada's...
Well, that's the thing. How do you know it's 14 days? It's very strange.
Now that the truth has been exposed by the Commissioner, will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for the Environment.
And what the Auditor General confirmed is that Canada's emissions are down below levels that we haven't seen since the mid-1990s. And we've proposed more measures to drive our emissions down, and the Conservatives want to work against us. What the Conservatives have confirmed today is they don't work for Canadians, they don't care about the environment, they don't listen to science, and they want our emissions to go up, Mr. Speaker. The failed former leader from Regina Capel has said repeatedly that our emissions are superior to other countries, and they should be driven up. We should be given that permission to produce more greenhouse gas emissions than other countries, Mr. Speaker. Not on this side of the House. We believe in science, and we're fighting climate change.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, the carbon tax is going up. Greenhouse gas emissions are also going up. The Liberals have put in place a tax plan, not an environmental plan. And since the carbon tax, Canada has fallen to near last place among OECD countries for emissions. Meanwhile, the Environment Minister is burning fossil fuels to attend COP. When will there be an election? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Look, Mr. Speaker, I think we've already answered that question. But what Canadians would like to know is about the potential show of leadership when it comes to national security. And the question for the Conservative leader is, how is it that somebody who one day wants to be in charge of the Coast Guard can't even get a security clearance? What does he have to hide? What do they have to hide? What do they not want us to know, Mr. Speaker? They should do their job and get the security clearance.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver East.
A breeding ground for contemporary forms of slavery. That's what the United Nations call the Conservative and Liberal Temporary Foreign Worker Program. It's an immigration program that uses closed work permits that trap people to one employer. It abuses, exploits, and underpays migrant workers to help big businesses. It drives down wages and hurts everyone. It's just another initiative of Conservative and Liberals helping wealthy CEOs. Will the Liberals stop this exploitation of migrant workers by ending the closed work permit system, yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, the mistreatment and abuse of temporary foreign workers is unacceptable. Everyone deserves to work in safe, healthy, and dignified conditions. Under our watch, we have mandated employers provide all TFWs with information about their rights in Canada, prohibited reprisal by employers against workers who come forward with complaints, and prohibited employers from charging recruitment fees to workers. And in Budget 2024, Mr. Speaker, we are investing $41 million to ensure that TFWs know their rights by funding community organizations. We know there is more work to do.
I ask once again all members, especially the member who just asked the question from Vancouver East, to please not take the floor unless recognized by the chair. The honourable member from Churchill-Kuwatanuck-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, Barons River First Nation still does not have clean drinking water. The water treatment plant is over a year behind schedule, and the community has been forced to haul water over 300 kilometers by truck every time, costing thousands of dollars. The lack of clean water has impacted dialysis patients, the health of children, elders, the whole community. And yet the Liberals aren't keeping on top of the contractor who hasn't gotten the job done. They're not funding the equipment the First Nation has asked for. Once again, the Liberals are failing First Nations on clean water. What are they going to do to deliver clean water to Barons River now?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
I want to thank the members of the INAN Committee who passed a government amendment declaring a human right to clean drinking water on First Nation, historic for this country, Mr. Speaker. And I really hope the member opposite will help ensure that we have smooth passage of this bill through this House and into Senate so we can get this law in place and protect water for generations to come. And I also want to congratulate two of the First Nations in her own riding who just...
Wow, you've been in for power for 9 years and you're just trying to pass this law now, or this bill now. Very good. Yep, congrats. Pat yourself on the back, you fucking idiots.
One of the most difficult tasks faced by our government was to repair Veterans Affairs Canada after all the damage done by the former Conservative government. I know that it was tough to fix, but I also know that many hardworking public servants at Veterans Affairs headquarters on Prince Edward Island are proud to make a positive impact once again. As that most solemn of days approaches, November the 11th, will the Minister of Agriculture share with this House how our government has been helping to make a difference in the lives of veterans and their families?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague from Egmont for his question. And as you're aware, Mr. Speaker, the former Conservative Government of Canada slashed funding from the Department of Veterans Affairs, slashed hurt veterans, and closed 9 Veterans Affairs offices right across the country that serve veterans right across this country. Since we formed the government, Mr. Speaker, we have invested over $11 billion in veteran support and have opened the 9 offices across this country. Veterans can be assured that our government, the Liberal government, will continue to support veterans right across the country.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Revelations in court filings show that there's another lawsuit against the Liberal minister from Edmonton showing that he broke the law. This one shows that his shady company and his business partner, well, he's now been directly named in this lawsuit in their search for buyers. Quote, they're going to sell this. I just updated Felix and Randy. And quote, are you confident really? I won't tell Shauna, Felix and Randy yet. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, they're not worth the cost or the corruption. So will the Liberal minister from Edmonton stand up and admit to Canadians that he broke the law?
Yeah. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this issue has been dealt with by the Ethics Commissioner, who has cleared that member on 3 occasions. When it comes to his former business partner, we agree with this House. He should have been clear and answered those questions, and now he will face those consequences. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Canadians can't believe a word from these Liberals when it comes to this scandal. We know that the cabinet minister was sitting around the table while his company was applying for federal government contracts, and we know that his business lied before a parliamentary committee. But there's more explosive reporting today about the Liberal minister from Edmonton and his company fraudulently applying for government contracts. Now, experts are saying that if this is proven to be true, that the Prime Minister should expel the minister from cabinet. Conservatives are saying we should call the cops. So will the Prime Minister fire him today or wait till he's dragged out in handcuffs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is making reference to an article that came out today, and I can assure everyone in this House and those watching that the article confirms that the company in question has never received any contracts as an Indigenous business and has never been listed on the Indigenous Business Directory. And our focus is on building up Indigenous businesses and entrepreneurs through procurement. We're not going to let any members across the way try to block the progress to achieving economic reconciliation, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to work with Indigenous partners to reduce the barriers and increase participation in federal procurement.
Order. The honourable member from Sturgeon River, Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, Indigenous people are outraged that government contracts meant for Indigenous businesses are being scooped up by shady companies with no Indigenous connection. Today we learned that the Minister of Employment's fraud-ridden company, Global Health Imports, claimed to be Indigenous in order to try and secure millions in lucrative government contracts. Now this all happened while the Minister of Employment was actively running the company. It's time to end the charade. When will the Minister admit that he is the real Randy and acknowledge that it's wrong to falsely claim Indigenous heritage and take contracts meant for Indigenous peoples and resign?
The Randy situation. It's back.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Procurement Services.
Mr. Speaker, we're taking every effort to ensure that Indigenous people are properly associated with the contracts that are procured. That's why we've established the very motion.
So more money has gone missing from more Liberal contracts to businesses that didn't deserve it. And while all of this is going on, there are still Indigenous people that don't have clean drinking water. So we're sitting here arguing about money when they don't even have fucking drinking water. I can't. I actually can't anymore. This government is so weird. It is so strange.
Halliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, today it was revealed that a company co-owned by the Employment Minister bid on federal contracts while claiming to be Indigenous-owned. The company, Global Health Imports, has 2 shareholders. Perhaps 3 if you count.
Yeah, that's like third world stuff to not have clean drinking water. I don't really know how else to put it. I really don't.
Companies, with the vast majority of those federal contracts going to non-Indigenous businesses. Will the Prime Minister listen to those leaders, call an investigation, and remove the minister from cabinet until the inquiry is finished?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
The article makes it very clear the association that was being referenced here did not get a contract. They were not listed on the Indigenous list, and we've taken the steps appropriately in the procurement to ensure that that doesn't happen, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. There's what the government does, and then there says, and then there's the facts. And unfortunately, these two things don't often correspond. The Environment Commissioner's reports are very hard to read.
Uh-oh. Greg's gonna lay a smackdown here.
I would invite the Honourable Member for Jonquière to start again from the top, please. There's what the government says, and then there's the facts. And unfortunately, these two things don't often correspond. The Environment Commissioner's reports make tough reading. And despite what the minister claims, the Liberals' record is really not good. This government takes the survival of threatened species lightly. And when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, well, Canada is the worst in the G7 when it comes to meeting its targets. The Liberals have quit. Are they really ready to leave biodiversity and the fight against climate change to the Conservatives? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my colleague knows how much respect I have for him, but you know, a good part of his party is allied with the Conservative Party to bring down the government to prevent a cap on emissions in the oil and gas sector. They want to prevent us from putting in place a law to protect nature. And when we came to power in 2015, Mr. Speaker, Canada didn't protect even 1% of our oceans and our coasts. We're up to 16% today. We'll be at 30% in 2030, as we promised in Montreal at COP15.
For the second time today, I'm going to ask the honourable member from Miramichi Grand Lake to please not take the floor unless recognized by the chair.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Canada.
He just gives the death stare. He is so weird.
Target of 45% under 2005 levels. 6 years. According to the Environment Commissioner, Canada has only reduced emissions by 7.1% as of 2022. That's a terrible record. By the time the federal government wakes up, all the forests will have burned and all the glaciers will have melted. 7.1%, that's not even a sixth of the goal. And, I mean, come on, Mr. Speaker, do they really want to leave the future of the planet in the hands of the Conservatives and their friends in the oil and gas sector? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind my colleague that when we came to power in 2015, the projections were that Canada was going to miss its 2030 target by at least 30%. We have flattened the curve, and as of 2022, we were at 7.1% under 2005 levels. That's the difference between the two. It's like the equivalent of adding 79 million cars to Canada's roads with, pollution. We didn't do that because of our plan, and I look forward to working with my colleagues so that Canada can do more to fight climate change.
The Honourable Member for Banff-Airdrie.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost of housing, and veterans who fought for our country are feeling the pinch more than anyone. Sadly, veterans are 3 times more likely to become homeless. And a recent study indicates that there's 4 times more homeless veterans than the government claims. As many as 10,000 homeless veterans, in fact. Terrible. That's 10,000 too many. Yeah. So how can the government who caused the problem and who won't even admit the extent of the problem be trusted to fix the problem?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, the cost of sending our citizens to war includes the cost of taking care of them when they come home. That's why we have moved forward with programs that are designed to actually ensure that communities have the capacity to provide housing.
Or we can just stop sending our people to unnecessary foreign wars? What kind of answers are these? Are you insane? Like, I understand that there's people that want to serve in the military and serve in the army. And that is fine. You have the right to do so, and I respect you and appreciate you putting your life on the line for that. But how about we just don't send our soldiers over to unnecessary wars? Let's just start off with that.
Homeless veterans just keeps going up. So obviously the photo ops and press releases aren't getting the job done, Mr. Speaker. The Veterans Association Food Bank in Calgary reports that in the last 6 months alone, their numbers have tripled in what they're spending to keep veterans housed, clothed, and fed. Veterans served our country, and they deserve better than the homelessness and hunger that they're getting from this NDP Liberal government. Veterans, like all Canadians, can't afford the cost. So when will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election so veterans can finally get the respect they deserve?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Veterans Affairs.
We're not going to take any lessons from the Conservatives. They shut down 9
Veterans Affairs offices. We opened 9, plus another one in my hometown of Surrey Centre. They laid off 1,000 Veterans Affairs officers who are there to help veterans get the services they need. We reinstated those services. We've created services to help those veterans get the needs that they need, and we will continue to do so going forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal government, the cost of rent and housing has gone up. It's doubled, and homelessness is up. The Bloc has supported the Liberals for 2 non-confidence votes. The Conservatives are calling for cutting the GST on new homes, and we've heard from many who feel that the Conservative leader's plan is a step in the right direction. Will the Liberal Bloc cut the GST on housing, or is it going to continue to fund its programs that build 0 new homes? The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Honestly, Mr. Speaker, as the member knows very well, we are making investments to build affordable housing. Just as an example, in the Housing Accelerator Fund, we have an agreement underway with Quebec to build 8,000 social housing units. The Conservatives are against that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they talk about when we cut GST for apartment rent, the Conservatives for building apartments, the Conservatives were against that. The Conservatives' leaders' strategy is just to cut, and that's unacceptable.
The honourable member for Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, cities like Toronto are on the front lines when it comes to responding to the housing crisis. That's why last year we announced a $500 million federal investment in Toronto through the Housing Accelerator Fund to unlock over 53,000 new homes over the next decade. Last week, the Conservative leader announced a plan that will impact home building in Toronto by making dangerous cuts to housing investments. People in my constituency of Davenport can't afford these kinds of enormous Conservative housing cuts. To the Minister of Housing, how can we stop these Conservative cuts and solve the housing crisis for Canadians?
Really good question.
Thank you very much.
Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
I want to offer a couple of points. First, I want to thank my colleague for her advocacy for her community to receive funding through the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is delivering hundreds of millions of dollars for housing in Toronto. Fascinating, Mr. Speaker, is the Conservative strategy, which is now to forbid their MPs from advocating for their communities. On this side of the House, we have community advocates who will stand up so their communities get the funding they need. Second, we know that actually building homes takes investments. That's why we're putting money into the system to help build affordable housing, to help reduce barriers to construction. But third, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative strategy is to cut billions of dollars from housing. That simply isn't going to work.
I ask the honourable member from Kingston and the Islands to please, if he wishes to have a conversation, to have it offline. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
The honourable member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's failed gun policies are putting Toronto at risk. This year, there have been 126 more shootings in Toronto compared to last year, and Peel Regional Police report seizing 1 illegal firearm every 36 hours.
Holy.
The Liberal MPs who were elected from the Toronto area should be here making noise about these problems, but they're silent. And why are they silent, Mr. Speaker? Because they've decided to back up the Prime Minister's failed policies. When will they stop choosing the Prime Minister over the people?
Cheers to that.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, our position as a Liberal Party, my position as a Toronto MP is simple. Let's keep the citizens of our cities safe. How do we do that? By ensuring that we have less gun violence on our streets. How do we do that? By shoring up our borders to prevent guns from crossing the border. The specific border services that party cut when they were in power prior to 20.
To be honest, it's even worse that he just admitted he's a Toronto MP because the Toronto Police Association themselves came out and exposed the Liberal government based on their handgun policies. So no, they're not listening, and this guy just continues to lie. It is actually wild.
I want my friends and neighbors in Toronto to take note. This Liberal Justice Minister is looking back at things that happened over 10 years ago while he's been here for 9 years and takes zero responsibility for crime getting worse. Imagine that, getting elected to serve your constituents, sitting here for 9 years and can't take a single bit of responsibility for a problem that he should be trying to fix. Mr. Speaker, it's very, very clear. Crime is worse. The Liberal MPs elected to serve Toronto are failing to do their job. When will they stop choosing the Prime Minister over the people?
Let's go, man. Absolutely just annihilated him. That's what I'm talking about right there, man.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our government works very effectively with law enforcement professionals across the country, including the regional police, the Peel Regional Police that my colleague referred to, the City of Toronto, the York Regional Police. We've invested, Mr. Speaker, money that the Conservatives cut in the RCMP.
Yeah, literally, go do stuff. Wait, the criminals still get... Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Insanity.
Would turn back gun control.
It's weird that the criminals don't follow the laws. Oh, oh, oh.
To have assault-style firearms on the streets of the country.
The Honourable Member from Niagara Falls.
Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, corruption, or crime. Since 2015, when they formed government, violent crime has skyrocketed by 50%. And sadly, during their reign of error, they have also allowed an evil monster, Paul Bernardo, to be transferred to a medium security institution. On November 26th, this child rapist and serial killer is scheduled to have a parole hearing. Will this NDP Liberal Prime Minister finally get tough on crime and assure Canadians that Paul Bernardo will remain behind bars where he belongs for the rest of his life?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's important for all members in this House not to use the name of some of the most notorious killers in the country to give them the exact publicity that they crave. This particular individual is locked up in a federal prison behind two very high fences with a lot of razor wire. Mr. Speaker, I saw myself the secure federal correctional facility that this particular individual is in. My colleague also knows the parole board is independent and it would be absolutely inappropriate to prejudge their work, but I have confidence that they'll do their work properly for public safety.
Oh, I think you should be prejudging their work. If he is even getting the possibility of parole.
Millions of Canadians tuned into CBC to cheer on Team Canada at the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris. Canadian athletes pushed limits, set new records, and showed us the unifying power of sport. Many of these trained at Canadian Sport Institute Atlantic in Halifax West. Canada's athletes give it their all to represent our country, so we're going to keep supporting them with more pay for more athletes as they train to represent Canada. Can the Minister of Sport and Physical Activity tell us how we're going to support these athletes so they can keep representing Canada with pride and excellence?
The Honourable Minister for Sport and Physical Activity.
Mr. Speaker, the Paris 2024 Games were extraordinary. Canadians cheered on our Olympic and Paralympic teams as records were broken, medals were won, and history was made. The journey from playground to podium is long and it's hard, and our athletes trained for years. Our Liberal government is proud to support over 1,900 athletes through the Athlete Assistance Program, and we're also proud to be increasing this program to provide more money for more athletes. An additional $7 million a year means a 23% in the living allowance and an additional 30% allowance for Paralympic athletes. By investing in Canadian athletes, we're inspiring the next generation and building a stronger, united Canada.
The Honourable Member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, homelessness is growing among seniors for the first time ever. Canadian seniors who live on fixed incomes are being hit hardest by skyrocketing rents driven by unregulated corporate.
Yes, he's like Pinocchio, but instead of his nose getting longer, it just gets brighter and brighter red.
Parents, grandparents, and veterans out of their homes. When will the Liberals stop caving to corporate landlords and private long-term care investors to protect seniors.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for her question, and I share her concern about the plight of some of Canada's most vulnerable, those without a roof over their head. In order to address those challenges, we need to ensure that we build out the affordable housing stock so people can find a place that is safe, that they can afford. That's why we're moving forward with billions of dollars of investments to help build affordable housing in this country at a pace that is not seen in many decades. It's why we put money on the table to support nonprofits to buy up existing affordable housing that exists in the market to ensure that it remains affordable forever, and it's why we have restored, after decades of cuts, more investments in cooperative and affordable housing. We'll continue to do what it takes to ensure every Canadian.
The Honourable Member for Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians will soon pause to remember the brave men and women of
Let's
Canada's
go,
armed
Kevin.
forces who served our country and made the ultimate sacrifice. Whether in Flanders, on Juno Beach, the hills of Korea, or the sands of Afghanistan, they fought for Canada, for our democracy, and the freedoms that we all enjoy today. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to wear this country's uniform. I believe in our democratic institutions. I believe all members of this House are duty-bound to accept and hold high the torch passed from those fallen in the defense of Canada. Mr. Speaker, I respectfully ask the government if they all can say the same.
Ooh, Kevin asking the real questions. Let's go. Let's go.
The Minister
He's
for
always
Veterans
going
Affairs.
against the grain.
Mr. Speaker, we all admire the sacrifice and service that veterans have given to us. I think that question was quite out of line. However, as it is Veterans Week, I think it does deserve to remember and commend all the veterans who sacrificed their lives, given back for our freedoms, and protected the democratic processes that we have today. We will always remember them, not only on Veterans Week, but every day of this year. Thank you.
I see that the Honourable Member from Cowichan Malahat Langford is rising on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, there have been consultations, and I hope that if you seek it, you will find consent for the following motion. That the House, 1, recognizes that attacks on places of worship threaten all Canadians' charter-protected right to freedom of worship. 2, recognizes the recent increases in attacks targeting places of worship. 3, calls for the government to work urgently with...
I'm afraid I'm hearing a number of no's for the Honourable Member's request for unanimous consent.
Just shut down.
It being 3:15, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the amendment of Mr. Chambers to the motion to concur in the 20th report of the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. Call on the members.
All right. That is gonna do it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all enjoyed another day of political theater. I do believe that is going to be... Where are we? The 7th? Yeah, we have one tomorrow, which I don't cover. And that is going to be a week break. A long week break. So the government can rewrite their new scripts. So they can all sit there and laugh at how they're duping Canadians. Because at the end of the day, that's all this truly is, isn't it? Political theatrics. It's no different than the WWE. I think we need to have a big stage and a big Jumbotron screen that they can walk off of, and we have like big light theatrics and all that going on. We need to go all for it, because our parliament is a joke. Realistically, we have been talking about the SDTC issue since like September. Since like literal September. And it is almost halfway through November. I don't know what they're going to talk about. I don't know what the new script writes are going to be about in the upcoming days or weeks, but I would assume it's going to be more of the same stuff. A lot more of slogans from the right and bullshit from the left. NDP saying some stupid stuff here and there. It's all fun and games for them at the end of the day. Is it not? Is it not? Anyway, I want to thank you all for joining. That is going to be the end of the stream, the end of the show. I will see you all on the 18th. On the 18th. If anything happens throughout the dull week, I will go live. I will try to cover it. But I guess we'll see what happens. Thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day or night. Bye-bye.